Welcome back to Black Mental Health Matters. I'm Dr. Carrie Ann Williams, and this is a show that's about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community. If you have a question or comment at any time, just drop it in the comment section. And guys, Happy New Year. This is the first episode of season 2 of my podcast. And last year, at the beginning of the year, I started the year off with my kind of like top 15 tips to boost your mental health in 2021. And that's available on my podcast. But this year, I wanted to kick the year off with some practical mindfulness exercises that you can easily do. It's been such a stressful start to the year. COVID positive rates are up, and there's a nationwide staffing shortage, and the list goes on. And so people often want to know, what can they do to infuse moments of self-care into their day? And Dr. Patrice Mann is here with us today to help talk about that. She is a psychiatrist and a professor at Emory University. She's a trained mindfulness group leader. She also has a master's in public health and a special interest in health promotion and making health-related information accessible and digestible to the public. So in this week's podcast, she's going to guide us through a couple of practices that we can do to transform mundane daily activities into opportunities for mindfulness. And we're going to discuss how when we adapt the mindset that anything can be done mindfully, we can start infusing our days with more moments of present awareness without adding another thing to our calendars. So welcome to the show, Dr. Patrice Mann.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in mindfulness.
Sure. And so, like you mentioned, I am a psychiatrist at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. I work in the student health services where I see undergraduate students and graduate and professional students and treat a variety of mental health concerns. And I graduated, finished my residency training at Cambridge Health Alliance, where we have met, where you were one of the professors of one of our best classes in child psychiatry. So while I was in residency, in addition to my general psychiatry training, I took more of an interest in mindfulness and different practices and things that can be used to complement, medication, traditional individual psychotherapy. And I was able to explore a lot with mindfulness, both personally taking mindfulness classes and taking self-compassion classes, and then also becoming trained as a mindfulness group leader. And before reaching residency, I would say my first kind of place where my interest was piqued in mindfulness was in college. I took a health psychology class, and there was some talk about mindfulness as a health intervention. And we did a couple practices during that class. Specifically, I remember doing a mindful eating exercise with a raisin, which is a very common exercise that is done. And we did a body scan where you go through you're instructed to go through your entire body and bring your awareness to sensations and, your head, your shoulders, your arms, all the way down to your feet and your toes. And that, I believe, is where I first became interested in this idea of, I can kind of shift my shift my attention. I'm able to engage with my attention in this kind of way, which was particularly in college and, still now sometimes something that I struggle with. Like, it's like your attention wants to go here and there, and it wants to go to the news, and it wants to go back here. And so when I kind of started gaining that awareness that, I can engage with my attention in this way, I don't have to just kind of follow it around. That was really my first introduction and the thing that really piqued my interest in wanting to learn more about mindfulness.
Wow. So what, you talked a little bit about shifting attentions. What does it mean to do something mindfully?
Definitely. So when I'm saying mindful, doing something mindfully, and today when we talk about doing exercises mindfully, what we're really talking about is bringing your full attention to the present moment and whatever it is that you're doing. So bringing your attention to just being here in this moment. What are you like what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What do you feel? Like what's going on in your body? What's going on in your mind? And bringing your awareness to just what's happening right now.
Mhm. All right. So I'm going to kind of get straight into it. I know you have a couple of examples for us, and I want people that are listening or watching to participate. So the first one is going to require the use of hand lotion. So if you're listening or watching, grab a bottle of hand lotion and keep listening. And Dr. Mann, can you just explain the first exercise and kind of guide us through it?
Definitely. And so, one of the things we talked about in terms of what we were trying to do with this podcast is to give people tips of things that they can do. You can do with what you already have. It doesn't require you to go buy anything, it doesn't require you to have anything special. And, this being Black Health Matters, Black Mental Health Matters podcast, I think Black people often are not too far from a bottle of lotion,
You got
So,
to keep your hands from being ashy.
exactly. So either you have some lotion, or usually you can identify someone around you that has a purse that looks like maybe it has a little lotion in it for you. But so what we're going to do is an exercise with this hand lotion. And there are two principles that can be really exemplified by this practice. And so one of them is the idea of beginner's mind. And using this mindset is something that you can do that will help you to adapt many different activities to being more mindful. And a question that you can ask yourself is, what if I was doing this for the first time? What if this was the first time I had ever seen a bottle of hand lotion? What if I was an alien and like was looking at this like what is this? Or, what if this was, for all of us, probably it's not going to be the first time you've ever used lotion, hopefully. But what if it was the first time? Like using that kind of curiosity and bringing it to the things that you're doing in order to engage more deeply and engage your senses. And then another principle is the idea of savoring. So savoring is something that you can do by bringing your senses and getting them more engaged with anything that you do, be it something like putting on some hand lotion or sipping some tea, is something we were talking about before we got started, or just savoring sitting outside, feeling the sun on your skin, hearing the sounds that are around you, just really making sure that when the present moments come that are pleasurable, even if they are small, making sure that you're able to bring your senses to it and really, cherish and experience it while it is there.
Oh, wow. Okay. That sounds fantastic. I like that idea of like approaching it as though you'd never seen it before. Like, what do you think about it, how you're experiencing it, but also savoring, which is something that as busy people, we don't stop to savor, really. I mean, we can enjoy things, but we don't really savor them.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, especially not, oftentimes we need something like big to like grab our, it's a vacation, or it's like it is something you've never seen before or that you see once a year. But there are so many like little things that we do that happen day to day that we could bring more of ourselves and more of our awareness and more of our presence to.
All right,
Yeah.
so I have my hand lotion. What should I do?
Okay. Okay. All right. So we're gonna take about 5 minutes to do this practice. So setting the expectations of how we're gonna savor our experience with the hand lotion. So first thing we're gonna do is just get your hand lotion and we're just gonna look at it. We're gonna explore the hand lotion with our eyes in the packaging. So I'm looking at my packaging right now. I have a little travel sized winter holiday lotion, but again, you can use whatever lotion you have. You can use unscented lotion, you can use Vaseline, you can use, your generic eczema cream, anything, any kind of lotion. But I'm looking at the packaging. And so things that you can notice about the packaging as you're kind of exploring it with your eyes, like what shape is it? Like, is it a tube? Is it a cylinder? Is it like a little travel size like I have, or is it a big, family sized container? Can look at the colors. Like I'm seeing, for example, mine is mostly white, but there's some shades of green and some shades of, mine has some metallic, I guess gold and even brown and reds. There's writing on it. I'm seeing like there's pictures of mine, pictures of leaves, but writing on the front and the back. You
And
can
mine has a label
feel.
that has like a texture on mine. Like
Yes,
it has a little texture and these little diamonds on it. Yeah.
yes, that's a great thing to notice, the texture. Like mine is mostly like pretty like that kind of sleek plastic, but I'm feeling like a little bit of stickiness, like maybe it's from the label or maybe it's from like I need to pull off a little bit more of the tag. But these are things, and like even like the weight, like for example, like I said, mine is pretty small, but it's full, so it's got a little bit of weight to it, but maybe yours is
It's
almost
heavier.
gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, okay. And so then even before, again, we apply the lotion, just uncapping it or opening it, however you do, and just holding it under your nose and inhaling and seeing what you notice about that experience, like what aromas you notice. And that can be something like, there's a floral scent, or there's like, for example, mine is winterberry. I don't know if I really feel like it smells like winterberry, but it can be like it's floral or it's vanilla, or even if you chose a lotion that is not scented, even products that are not scented, oftentimes they usually smell, if you're inhaling them, like, they smell different than the air just
Yeah.
that you were breathing before you tried to see like what you might notice when you were inhaling. And so that's one thing. What are you noticing? Are you noticing
I
anything?
think it smells a little bit like vanilla. It's a difficult to place scent. It's a scent called sweater weather. The body works. So it doesn't really say what's in it, but it does smell kind of vanilla-y. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really give it a name, but like I'm noticing the aroma.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so then the next thing will be just to put a dollop, an amount, like a dime size amount, or however much you generally use for your hands, in your palm, and don't rub it in quite yet.
Okay.
Um, or if you already did, that's okay, because we're gonna just don't rub it any further. Yeah, and you can and so we're just gonna observe what it looks like in your hand. So some things that you can notice are like, what shape is it? Is it like maybe you had the kind that you had to scoop out like a dollop and put it in your palm? Maybe you're like me and you kind of squeeze it out in almost like an ice cream cone kind of cylinder. um and then you can look at like, what color is it? Is it white? Is it pink? Is it off white? um is it opaque? Is it more, see-through? Sometimes these things have like, glitter or some kind of shimmer to them. Or sometimes they're just completely like one color throughout. Like mine is like white, opaque, and looks a little bit almost kind of slimy or slick, like it's kind of rolling around in that way. But yeah, again, looking at it like, like you had never seen lotion, or maybe never seen this lotion. Like maybe this is the first time you've used this lotion, that this particular lotion. Like what is there to notice about it? And then can you notice the sensation, even just now, the sensation of the lotion on your palm? Is there anything, like, does it feel cool or warm or wet? Anything like that?
So mine is this shiny. It's white. It feels just a little bit cool. A little bit cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so then next, we're gonna do what you usually do with lotion. We're gonna start rubbing it in, however it is that you like to rub it in. And as you do this, bringing your attention just to the sensation of what it feels like, what the lotion feels like as you're rubbing it in.
Okay.
And you might notice things like kind of the feel of like, is it cool? Is it slick? Is it, does it feel greasy? Does it feel, things like that? You might notice, especially as you continue to rub it in, you might feel like the sensation of your hands rubbing together and like the friction of your hands, of your skin, rubbing in the lotion. See if you can be aware of sensations in your fingers, in your palms, the back of your hand, maybe your wrist if you rub it in that much. And as you're rubbing, paying attention to how do you know when it's time to fit? Like, how do you know when you've rubbed all the lotion in? Like, how does it look? How does it feel?
Always thinking about the webs of the fingers where they get really ashy.
Yes.
So one way to know.
Yes,
It does feel a little bit greasy. It does feel a little
yeah,
bit greasy, a little bit thick, so it leaves a coating.
yeah,
Kind of like a slippery coating. It's not all kind of disappearing, which, it's kind of makes it a bit slick.
yeah. And then when you feel like it's all kind of absorbed, taking another moment to, again, bring your awareness to the physical sensation of your hands. Like, how do they feel? Like, what do you feel? How does your skin feel either just you're not touching it? And how does it feel like, to the touch?
Oh, yeah. For me, it kind of does feel, if this is a right description, kind of like a bit more like plump, like it feels like it's been moisturized. But then it also feels kind of slimy almost.
I think maybe your lotion has that in common with mine. Like I feel almost like a little coated in a way. And then maybe giving another smell, like another inhale to your hands and thinking about, does it smell any different than you remember it smelling, when you were kind of giving that scent check when it was in the tube.
True. It does feel a little bit less, it's not as strong now that it's more distributed kind of over my hands.
Yeah, nice. And then, even giving your hands that visual inspection and, looking at the skin, the color and the texture of your skin, and just how your hands look in general and how they look now that they have been, like, now that you've done the, applying of the lotion.
Oh.
Okay. All right. And that is our first exercise.
Wow. So it's so simple. Like it goes from just, again, paying attention, the attention to how the bottle looks, how it feels, then how the lotion smells, and then how it looks, and kind of just the contrast, the temperature, just engaging all the senses. And it's something you can do very quickly without anybody around you even knowing that you're doing a mindfulness exercise.
Exactly. You can do this like in your office. You can do this during a meeting or during, while you're with people, or you can even do it's something that we often do. Most of us take, a shower and like put on lotion after the shower, every day. It's like, it is something that you can bring this awareness to, your general hygiene, daily routines too. So I think it's a really good way to begin to infuse some mindfulness into something that is a pleasant experience, but it's one that we'd often just, my hands feel dry and cracking, and I'm just kind of like, I just got to get this, taken care of. I just got to get, like you said, I just got to get the ash out of the, webs of my fingers.
My fingers.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes me think about if you ever like watch children and like if they find a bottle of scented lotion you see them kind of go through it that way, and they like look at it and they smell it, and you see them rubbing it on their hands, and they're like having this whole experience while we're like rushing around. So I can see that whole beginner's mind of like, this is what you would do if you were experiencing this for the first time. And it's like this mini vacation, like a mini mental break where you could be in a busy day and you can take 5 minutes to just experience a hand lotion, whether it's scented or not.
Exactly, exactly. And that's, and because some people, can't do scents or don't like to do scents. But like I said, even if you like even things that are unscented oftentimes have just have a scent to them,
Yeah.
or something that you can kind of like detect that just you're engaging it all. But yeah, I think that is definitely something you can do with anything. And it's also something that you can do when you have like a nice lotion and you want to you want to spend a little bit more time enjoying it, like when you have your kind of special, maybe a treat kind of lotion.
So that, I mean, I enjoyed that a lot. That's something that I can definitely do on a regular basis because I said, like, I lotion my hands several times a day. And especially now with all the hand washing, I wash my hands
Yeah,
very often. So I always have a bottle of
exactly.
lotion. They're actually even combination like lotion and hand sanitizers. I don't know if I'd recommend them, but they exist. So um,
Yes, I don't know if you purchased. I've actually purchased one myself. I don't know how I feel, but I definitely, like you said, you have to do it so often now. It's
yeah.
like, yeah,
So it's like, it kind of helps to reduce some of the dryness. So now the other thing that
definitely.
I've read about in mindfulness is that it can help to increase, it can change the way that we think about things, even in terms of like how you think about yourself. And they use this word of compassion. And I've always tried to figure out, how does mindfulness connect to compassion if it's really about attention? Can you tell me a little bit more about the connection between mindfulness and self-compassion?
Definitely. So, self compassion is the practice of bringing kindness, intentionally bringing kindness to ourselves in moments of struggling or difficulties. And part of mindfulness has to do with being intentional and being able to, be present, but also accepting kind of what is, accepting what is happening. And so taking that first step of accepting that one is suffering or that one is struggling, that is the big piece of mindful, where I see the big connection between mindfulness and self compassion. So being able to even be mindful that, like, for whatever reason, like I'm struggling, I'm suffering in this moment, and not making a whole lot of judgments about it and like running into like a narrative about it, but maybe I am, I made a mistake and I am, and it's hard for me to sit with that. It's hard for me to accept that. And so when we think about mindful self-compassion, there are kind of three steps or three components, and the first one being the mindfulness, which is being mindful and accepting that, this is a moment of suffering. Like, this is something that is, this is hard for me. The second is acknowledging that there is a common humanity to suffering and that there's a common humanity to struggling, and that, in some way we all struggle, and that is not, that we're not alone in that. And then the third is kind of extending a wish to yourself or setting an intention to be kind to yourself. So setting the intention to invite kindness into this moment of struggle. Um, and we definitely have an exercise that you can use, which we call as a self-compassion break.
Okay.
Um,
So starting
yeah,
off with acknowledging and then
yes,
connecting it as kind of, in some ways, normalizing that it's a human experience, and then
yeah,
going into being kind to yourself. Okay. Take us through it.
yeah. Okay. All right. So this takes about, 3 to 5 minutes. So you don't need to be in any kind of special posture or anything like that. If you, depending on where you are and what feels most comfortable, you can close your eyes or you can keep your eyes open, either one. So to start out, it helps if you can think about a moment or a situation that maybe happened for you recently, or something that, that's going on for you that is maybe bringing up some difficult feelings, like maybe something that you feel bad about, something you said or something someone said to you, or you feel like I'm feeling bad because I'm like running behind on errands or work or things like that. So if you can take a minute and bring to mind something like that, nothing too extreme that is like that's traumatic or anything like that, but if you can think about something that maybe is going on for you in the recent days or weeks, and really bringing to mind that experience.
Mhm.
And then we're just going to start by grounding yourself in just in your body. One way to do this is by bringing awareness to the physical sensation of your body on the chair. So maybe like the sensation of pressure of like your legs against the chair, your back against the seat, maybe your feet against the ground. And so taking a couple full deep breaths and thinking about whatever the scenario is that you kind of identified from before, and thinking about, is there anything that you can sense maybe in your body? Like, I know for myself, when I think about things like when I feel like I made a mistake, I have things sometimes, like even thinking about it, my heart kind of starts to feel like it's a little bit more accelerated, or I even maybe sometimes feel a bit more like hot or flushed or tingly. So if there's anything you feel physically, or maybe not, maybe it's more like cognitive, if you can identify any thoughts that you have, like I shouldn't have done that, or like I should have already done XYZ, or I messed that up. Like if there are any thoughts or things like that come up to kind of bring up the experience. And then having that in your mind, taking a moment to just, again, acknowledge this is a moment of suffering. You might say something like, this is tough. This is difficult. This is painful for me. But just acknowledging and accepting that you are having a moment of suffering. And careful to note that in this context, accepting doesn't mean that you're saying that it's right or that you're condoning. For example, if maybe you're dealing with someone who did something that was, mean to you, or that was not, that was just not right for them to have done. Like, you're not accepting that it was right for them to do it. It's not saying that you deserve what they did. You're just saying, like, I am hurting right now. I'm accepting that in this moment, I'm having a hard moment. And then the next step is going into, like we said, acknowledging that there is a common humanity to suffering, and that in different times and in different ways, everyone does struggle. And that is not, it is not a judgment about you or your worth, but that everyone struggles, and that you're not alone in suffering and struggling, but this may be your moment. This is your moment, your particular way of suffering, of struggling. And then before we do the final step, I would invite you to try adding some form of what we call like self-soothing or self-comforting touch. So an example of this is like placing your open hand over your chest, or you might use both hands, or sometimes people do things like a self hug where you're kind of grabbing your arms or your elbows, or depending on how comfortable you feel, sometimes putting your hands on your face. So these are different examples of ways that you can offer some just soothing self touch to yourself.
So it's not the same thing as like grabbing your head, like, oh, what happened to me?
Not the
This is what I
despair,
usually do.
not the Fauci like fist
Like,
palm, but
that sounds comforting.
I guess it could be, depending on how what you need. It is what you need. But offering some form of whatever felt like most soothing to you, and you'll probably have to experiment over time with what resonates most with you. But some self-soothing touch, and then offering to yourself and to kind of the universe a gentle wish of, may I be kind to myself? Or may I accept myself as I am? And, if you're at home, you can either, repeat some of these things to yourself in your head, or if you feel comfortable, you can say them out loud. Other examples might be, may I forgive myself? Or may I give myself the compassion that I need? And if you are, newer to this idea of self-compassion, or perhaps you're thinking about something that is really challenging for you, you might need to make the wish even gentler by adding something like, may I learn to accept myself as I am, or may I learn to forgive myself, which, you know, adds to it this concept that you're probably, if you're struggling with self-forgiveness, you're not going to learn to forgive yourself, by the end of this exercise, or by the end of, this day or this month. But setting kind of the intention that it's something that you are open and hopeful that you might learn to do over time. So taking a moment to kind of repeat any of the statements that seemed relevant to you in your mind. So something, may I accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be kind to myself? Again, may I learn to be kind to myself? And taking a moment to repeat that a couple times to yourself. And then as we prepare to end the exercise, going through the 3 steps again in your head. So the first being acknowledging this is a moment of suffering. The second, acknowledging that there is a common humanity to suffering, and that in different ways and at different times, we will all struggle in one way or another. And then the final step being extending the wish of, may I be kind to myself? May I accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I give myself the compassion that I need? Okay. All right. And
That
so
was
that
really
was our,
good. That was really good because I was, I was kind of trying to tap into, like the past week and like just thinking, yeah, just like be kind to myself. Like it's so, you're not gonna do everything perfectly and all that kind of stuff.
yeah. And it's simple, like in most of these things, like they're simple but powerful. And it's a simple concept of being kind to yourself, which is one that I think there's a lot of misgivings or misconceptions in society about the idea of self-compassion, that it's just like, if you're nice to yourself, then you're going to be like, you know, so you're going to make so many more mistakes. You're going to be so lazy. You're not going to get anything done. But in actuality, that's not what we really find. It's actually that, when you learn and are able to develop this practice of self-compassion, that you are a little bit less afraid of making mistakes, and that actually frees you up to try new things, to do things, to not be like paralyzed in like the fear of making a mistake, or the fear of, yeah, basically doing something that might disappoint you or someone else.
Yeah, I feel like it increases resilience because then if I make a mistake, I can quickly self-correct without like wallowing in all the negativity and all the negative emotions. I can say, oh, made a mistake. Let's just bounce back, move forward. Everybody makes mistakes. It's okay. Let's just keep, let's keep rolling, you know?
Exactly. And it's almost this idea that you, like, there are two people, like there's you, and then there's like the way that you respond to yourself. And it's like, you don't want to be afraid of yourself. You don't want to be like, I can't tell myself I made a mistake. I'm going to be so mad at myself. Like, the more kind of like when you're like, oh, like, I don't want to tell, I don't want to tell my, like, who my boss that I made this mistake, they're going to like rip me to shreds, versus if you're like, I have an understanding boss. Like they might be a little firm, but they'll help me kind of get what I need to get out of the situation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, and I feel like that also fosters compassion to other people, because then if someone else makes a mistake, I will be more likely to kind of lend that kind of compassion to them as well and say, oh, that's just how humanity is. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly. Because it's not, it's so we get so like into the mindset that like mistakes shouldn't happen and we should be, and it's like we actually shouldn't. There's no like that would not be we would not be mortal if we were not if we were like able to go through life without making any kind of missteps or mistakes or anything like that. Yeah.
so now if somebody does this frequently, does it get easier? I mean, is it helpful to like do this repeatedly, or can they, get a lot out of it if they did it once in a while?
Yeah, that is a great question. I find that with most mindfulness, it's similar. A good analogy is kind of the analogy of like physical exercise, where when you do physical activity, most of us find like, for example, you go for a brisk walk around the block or something like that. In the moment, you'll often feel like, physically you might feel more like relaxed. You might get some endorphins. Like even in that moment, you'll like feel a little bit like maybe a little more energized, whatever it is for you, how exercise affects you. But then it kind of will taper off. And and that's kind of the same thing with mindfulness. I find that, you do the practices and they're great to do like in a moment, like, if you're having a rough moment, definitely, if you found that doing a certain practice is helpful in that moment, it is great to do. And at the same time, when you do them daily and, that effect really compounds. So when you're able to do, a little bit of something every day, it gets, it gets easier. And it also, I think it kind of, the benefits extend even more to your day and to the rest of your day and your life and that kind of thing.
Wow. So it's more
Yeah.
than lasting benefits.
Yeah. So both of them. So whenever, if you can get a minute in here and there, do it. If you can get, but it's also like a probably the more regular, the better type situation too.
So is there any like evidence that doing these mindfulness practices regularly actually make us better? Like, in terms of like biology, like does it change the brain, or is it just making us feel good?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it's really cool the way that they have been able to research and kind of quantify the different ways that mindfulness affects people who do it regularly. Um, so a lot of the research is done on people who do these mindfulness courses that last about 2 months. And oftentimes they're doing some kind of practice for maybe about 30 minutes a day or something like that. And they have been using these different ways like MRIs where they do the brain, like the scans of the brain, and are able to see kind of like the sizes of different parts of the brain. Well, they've also done studies where they use EEGs, which is the machine that you use to like measure the different activity in different areas of the brain, where you see people with like, the stickers all over their head connected to the machine. And they have been able to identify multiple different ways that the brain changes in functionality, or it changes, even like different areas change in size when people have been practicing mindfulness regularly. So one of the areas, the amygdala, which plays a big role in like anxiety and stress, and there's definitely, all these different areas of the brain, like they are necessary. You need you would not be in a good place without any of them. But this one in particular, when it becomes like, can be overactive in situations like anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that, it can be overactive. They are actually finding that like the amygdala can reduce in size, like the brain matter kind of like reduces in size for people who are doing like this regular mindfulness practice.
And so it's a
There's
good thing that it gets smaller, like it's, I mean, like it's less overactive kind of.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And like there are also changes in terms of like the area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for a lot of just like things with attention and concentration and shifting attention and like impulse control and things like that. And then outside of the brain, they're often seeing things like markers in the blood, like cortisol levels can
Oh,
sometimes
wow.
change.
So like
So
the words, I know people talk about cortisol being like high because of stress. And so this can
yeah.
actually show that the cortisol levels are lower. Okay.
Yeah. So there are real, like, there are definitely over time changes that can happen when you make, mindfulness a part of your routine, and when you're able to, really practice it regularly and like master some of the skills that we come up with, some of the ones that we've been talking about even so far.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, it's so easy to get caught up in like anxiety, confusion, frustration. Like the news keeps changing, the CDC guidelines keep changing. That was my thing this week. The CDC guidelines were changing like every 2 hours.
Oh my
Um,
God.
you know, and so it's like everybody's kind of like really wound up. Um, I know we talked about sometimes you kind of feel these things in your body. You literally can feel the stress like as a kind of flushing sensation or that kind of thing. As we kind of wrap up, are there any mindfulness exercises that can help us with those physical kind of sensations that our body holds on to with stress?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there is so much going on. And I think that, a lot of mindfulness activities or not doing a lot of things mindfully can be helpful in these times. It's a difficult time to do them. And I do want to acknowledge and validate, like it is, when you're being bombarded by all of this, like CDC and like, the news and then like, whatever your family or whoever, it's like all these things, it is hard to be mindful in these moments, but when you are able to bring the mindfulness to these times, it can be definitely very transformative. And the final exercise that we want to do is it's a gentle mindful movement exercise, and find that doing some kind of mindful movement, it allows you to use your mind and your body to help anchor you in this present moment.
Okay.
And a lot of what we talk about is being in the present moment. And sometimes we don't go into like a lot of detail about like, why is it good to be in the present moment? One of the reasons is just that in this present moment, when you kind of narrow down into it as much as is like possible, like right now, I am sitting in my home. I am safe. I am, there's nothing really, I can't fight the coronavirus in the next 10 minutes. Like, I can't, like, I definitely can't go back and, redo an argument that I had, yesterday. I can't, like, there's nothing really that I can do in the next 5 minutes about, like, say something that I saw on the news, that kind of thing. So bringing yourself to this 5 minutes that you have right now where you're here and you are safe, and being able to connect with your body and with your surroundings, um, that is part of why mindfulness can be helpful during these kinds of times. And so we can start. It's a very simple, we're just going to do a couple simple movements,
Okay.
and with this in mind, at home, modify however you need to modify. The point is not to do any special posture or to reach any special pose or anything like that. It is just to bring awareness to the physical sensations in your body, which sometimes can be easier for a lot of us if we're moving our body as we are doing this.
Okay.
And so these are some simple things you can definitely do if you're sitting at home, on your couch or at your kitchen table. All right. And before we start, another thing that I will just note is that when we do these mindfulness practices, I think sometimes there's a misconception that you should be able to keep your mind on whatever you're doing for the entire duration of the exercise. And if you can't, then you did it wrong. But we want to set the precedence that when your mind wanders, that's okay. That's what minds do. They wander, they jump around. But when that happens, if you can notice it and then just kind of gently but firmly bring it back, and And I say when it happens and not if it happens, because when it happens, it is guaranteed, when you're trying to do these things that you will be like, oh, but what about what the CDC said? Or like, oh, what about, what about that thing I said yesterday? Like, I shouldn't have said that. Or, what's on TV? When that happens, bringing it back and just thinking of that as part of the practice. Like that is part of the mindfulness, the noting that your mind has wandered and bringing it back. And so we'll get started just by, again, grounding yourself in starting with the physical sensation of your body against whatever it is that's supporting you. So for me, I'm feeling the pressure of the kind of chair underneath me or the seat underneath me and a little bit behind my back. And I'm also feeling like my feet against the ground. And then taking a couple deep breaths. And then breathing normally. And we'll start by just kind of holding your hands up and kind of holding them in front of you. I don't want to block my camera, but kind of holding them in front of you and just making a fist and opening your hand and alternating doing that. And again, as much as is comfortable to you, don't do anything that makes you uncomfortable. But if it feels okay, making a fist and then stretching your hands out, stretching the fingers out, and bringing awareness to the physical sensation in your hands and where you're feeling that stretch. So, for example, I'm feeling the stretch in like the length of my fingers. Like you might notice that you're feeling it in your fingers, but do you feel it more in certain fingers than others? Do you feel it in all your fingers? Do you feel it in your palms, perhaps? It might even extend to like your forearms. And just seeing like how far, how much can you notice that you're feeling this movement?
And that I feel definitely is a contrast between the clenching and the stretching, because there's like a blood flow, kind of almost like a change. So it feels like a rush of blood sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. And I know for myself, I almost, when I'm doing the fist, it's like I can feel a little bit of the remnants of that lotion. Like it's a softer feel. And then taking a minute and doing some rotations of the wrist and seeing what you notice. I noticed the physical sensation, but when I started, I also had like an auditory, a couple pops. Maybe you heard something.
The sound of age.
Maybe you might have heard something like that. But yeah, like, see, do you feel it when you rotate your wrist, do you feel it in your hands at all? Do you feel it also along with your wrist? Do you feel it in your forearms? Maybe even down to like your elbows or beyond?
And I've noticed that I'm still kind of like paying attention to like the shininess of my fingers from the lotion. And I can still smell it. I can still smell the lotion. I have the strong lotion.
Okay. And then you can, when you feel like you're at a good stopping point, you can just rest your hands and shake them off. You can rest them in your lap or off to your sides. And then we're going to do a couple slow shoulder rolls. So starting by just bringing your shoulders, in front of you, like you want them to touch in front of you, and rolling them up to kind of your ears, and then rolling them back like you want your shoulder blades to touch, and then dropping them down. And then continuing with that movement to the extent and at the speed that feels comfortable for you. It doesn't have to be extreme. It can be as big or as small as you want. And bringing awareness to what physical sensations you're noticing, in your shoulders, maybe even on the skin. Like I can feel the sensation of like my clothes against my body as I'm rolling my shoulders. And again, are you feeling anything outside of your shoulders, like in your neck or your upper back or your mid back? And then when you feel comfortable, you can reverse whatever direction you were taking the shoulder roll.
I definitely feel some warmth.
Mm.
I think I'm holding tension in my shoulders, and it might be time for a massage. But yeah, I feel like this warmth from
Hmm.
it's almost like maybe starting to relax the tension that I had in my shoulders. So I'm feeling
Yeah.
like warmth. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like sometimes you like, does the circle feel smooth, or do you feel like any kind of like,
I had some pops.
yeah, yeah.
Again, the sounds of age.
And then you can relax your shoulders and we'll do a few slow neck rolls, and again, as much big or as slow as they feel comfortable to you, but maybe starting bringing your chin to your chest, and then your left ear to your left shoulder, and then kind of looking up towards the ceiling, and then your right ear to your right shoulder, and continuing with that again in the size and the speed that feels most comfortable. And then, reversing whenever you feel moved to reverse and go the opposite direction. And just bringing awareness to the changing, like the way the sensation changes and where you feel it at different points in the rotation. When we do it, it's often, I feel it in my neck as I, on the sides of the neck, depending on where the head is at. But also sometimes you can feel it like in your jaw a little bit, or like in the like tops of your shoulder.
I can feel like the
Yeah.
stretch extends into the shoulder. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I'll say at the end of a mindful movement exercise, I like to just encourage people to do any kind of movement that maybe it feels like your body needs at this moment. Like if it feels like you want to turn and do like stretch your waist out, or stretch reach up, or do anything like that. I find that once you kind of do a couple mindful movements, it's like you almost bring awareness to your body, and then you're like, oh wait, I actually also want to do this other thing.
Yeah.
And so people know what that is for them. So whatever it is for you, if you feel moved to do something else, just taking a minute to shake it out, or to stretch, whatever. And yeah, and that is the end of that exercise. And that's one that, some of these movements you probably are hard to do if you're in a meeting or something like that. But
Yeah.
a lot of things you can do a brief shoulder roll, just to bring your awareness back to your body and to release, like you're saying, kind of like releasing some of that tension that's been building up. Yeah.
I feel like people do these things without, they kind of do them mindlessly. So people stretch in between meetings. You see them stretching at their desk, but their mind is busy. And so I can see
Yeah.
how if you're already kind of like doing stretching, you can do it mindfully. Just bring your attention to it. You're stretching your arms out, up, stretching this way, that way, stretching their legs. You're at a
Yeah.
conference and you're sitting all day. Just kind of switch to doing it mindfully and paying attention to all the different sensations and feelings if you're going to
Yeah.
stretch anyways.
Exactly. I think a lot of times asking the question for me has been helpful. Like, where all do I feel this stretch? Like, for example, like when you're stretching your legs or when you're doing something, it's like, sometimes it's like, okay, I feel it in my calves, but I actually feel it also like a little bit in the back of my, thigh, or I feel it, in my foot a little bit. So that's a way that you can kind of ask a question that will help you infuse a bit more mindfulness when you're, doing the stretching and things that you already are doing.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this has been so great. Thank you so much for all the different kind of practical things. Your things are so accessible. Just have a bottle of hand lotion with you, or just stretch at your desk, or just kind of like quickly go through this process in your mind of self-compassion. It's something that any of us can do at any point in the week. And it's very, very useful. So I want to thank you for sharing that. So any closing thoughts as we are kind of wrapping up here?
Definitely. And thank you so much, Dr. Carrie Ann, for having me. I've really enjoyed going through these practices with you. And I hope that they will be just helpful for people, and that, either doing these practices or just looking for ways in your own life, whatever it might be for you, whether it's, something like maybe you can bring mindfulness to some part of your night routine, be it taking a shower, or, even something like, your face routine is one that a lot of us just kind of slap on the products and keep it moving. But I think the big takeaway, I just hope that people feel confident in knowing that they can bring mindfulness to whatever it is that they're doing. You don't have to necessarily take a class, or you don't have to, buy a certain cushion or some yoga pants or anything. Like, it is something that is accessible to all of us, wherever it is that we are.
Yeah. So I thank you for that. And, guys, thank you, all of those that have been listening. Thank you for joining me today for Black Mental Health Matters. And again, thanks to Dr. Patrice Mann, who is joining from Georgia. So
Yes.
you're in Georgia right now. So thanks for and the power of the internet kind of brings it all together. And guys, definitely tune in next week. I'll have another guest on. We're going to be talking about managing grief in the new year, which I think is going to be really helpful. And I'm hoping the week after that, I'll talk more specifically about grief in children. So we have a couple of other episodes lined up for later this month. If you have any questions, again, just drop a comment in the comment section. I'll be able to see that even after the live stream has ended. So thank you and have a great week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.